Hello, good morning, good evening. We're back again. And I'm in a good mood. I decided to call off work tomorrow because, why not? So, that's what you get days for, right? And I didn't even do that on purpose, y'all. It kind of just happened that way. I promise, because you're probably going to be like, oh, that was like a week like little segue, but I promise it's not. But watch this. So, today's episode is centering around rest and the need for rest. And am I taking off tomorrow because of rest? Partially. Partially, I just don't want to go either. But, I took it as an excuse. But before we get too far here, let's get with today's meme. So the meme this week reads, "You'll look like the skeleton from Nightmare Before Christmas if you don't stop skipping your sleep." All right. The inspirations for this episode come from a little bit of a few different places. So the first one comes from Matthew 11:28, which says, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, I will give you rest." Also, the inspiration comes from RBF, which is, the resting, be face. And I'm going to tie everything in later. And then the last one, or the other one, is a comment or a quote by Siri Ravi Shankar. It says, "Wisdom is knowing when you have to rest, when to have activity, and how much of each to have." All right. Now, before we get too deep, it was something that happened not too long ago. And I saw it, it was talking about Tory Lanez. I don't really know why Tory Lanez keeps coming up, but he keeps coming up. For those who don't know who that is, it's an R&B singer, and he's known for his certain style of like his mixtapes and albums. And basically, he was on a Breakfast Club, and he was recently asked about August Alsina. If you didn't know, this was a few weeks ago. Apparently, he tried to like speak to August Alsina, and August Alsina didn't respond to him, and he got real mad about it. And I just felt like when he was interviewed, it was interesting to see that he kept changing the subject. They kept asking him about, you know, August, and they kept asking about other things, stuff that was going on. He kept changing the subject. So I thought that was interesting because it seems like the person that's always in the wrong always loves to deflect. He's never come clean about anything from what it seems. I mean, it seemed like he always just kind of changed the subject. But I've noticed that a lot. Now, again, the whole him and the Megan thing, I just kind of feel like we should be off that. It's happened. It's over with. I'll say this. If you continue to bring up old stuff and it's just like they keep bringing it up, they keep dragging it, and I'm just like, why? It happened so long ago. It keeps being a hot topic for some reason. Now, when we talk about August Alsina, it was interesting because somebody made a comment because I guess he just posted a new selfie and they were like, he looks like a totally different person every time. And they said it in a way where it was like, I guess kind of like shady like, but he does have a sickness. And the thing is, why are we so quick to we're so quick to like talk about people and their sicknesses and like don't realize these people have disorders and things. And he made a comment, and his rebuttal to the statement was when someone asked, he was like, he spoke about himself in third person. I thought that was interesting. He said, and this is August Alsina, he says, "August Alsina feels the same way. Every time he wakes up, he's a new shape shift, aesthetically and spiritually. He somehow thinks that it is connected to the effect of how the body he in processes massive trauma, deals with the massive shadow, and dreadfully fights to turn into light." So, a little spooky, just a little bit. But he has a disorder, for those that don't know. And I did see something that somebody was like, well, he's clearly been getting his rest, and he's been getting, which he kind of has to, because sometimes he can go on bed rest and just be out of it. So here's the thing. Your body tells you what's going on. We noticed that with acne, especially as adults. When we teenagers, a little different. And I work with teenagers, so they be freaking out. I'm like, your body, this is how it is. You just got to deal with it. But adults, typically, if your face starts breaking out, or your lips are chapped a lot, or you're real tired all the time, drowsy, like your body's trying to tell you something. And unfortunately, your body can tell you good things. Sometimes if you go in the bathroom and it may come out an odd color or much darker than it needs to be, you're not doing something right. However, it comes out a little clearer. That's the sign of like, okay, you're healthy. So before I end off going to the next part and introduce my guest, I just have to say, if you ask me, did Tory Lanez make the best decision in the interview? Absolutely. I think it's always good to kind of change the subject when people are trying to be messy and all that. Did August Alsina make the best decision? Personally, I believe so, because he's getting his rest and he has a disorder, so he got to do what's best for him, right? Now, this episode, as I said, centers around rest, and we actually going to learn a lot of different aspects that go along with that. So, before I get to rambling, because I'm not the expert, but I know who is, I need to introduce my guest. All right. Tell the people what's your name, where you're from, and where do you live?
So my name is Annie Miller, and I am a therapist. I work outside of Washington, D.C. Basically, it's, just right next to Washington in a place called Bethesda, Maryland.
Okay, I've heard of that actually.
Have
Okay,
you?
yeah. What do you said you're a therapist? So, what kind of therapist are you?
So yeah, I'm a clinical social worker, but I have done some very specific training in a field called behavioral sleep medicine, which is basically a fancy way of saying, treating insomnia and other sleep problems using therapy. Um, and so that's one of my specialties is treating sleep issues. And also I work in the same way with chronic pain and with trauma.
Okay. So now, I'm going to ask you a few different words and few different words, and I want you to tell me the first thing that comes to your mind. There's no right or wrong answer.
All right.
All right. So when you hear the word rest, what is the first thing that comes to mind?
Um, I think about lying down, but not in bed, somewhere else, and
Okay.
just, yeah. And I'll elaborate on that a little later.
Definitely. But it's funny because I remember, especially my mom likes to say that a lot. I like call like, "What are you doing?" So I'm resting. But obviously you should not sleep if you're on the phone. So hearing that a lot, it's it's funny because that's funny you say that. All right. So when you hear the word therapy, what is the first thing that comes to mind?
Um, I think about someone sitting on a couch and and
Yeah.
actually now these days being online, which is a lot of how I do my therapy, but really learning and growing from what they're and talking about what's going on with them.
All right. When you hear the word habit, what is the first thing that comes to mind?
When I hear the word habit, I think about the brain kind of immediately.
Okay. And last one, when you hear the word insomnia, what is the first thing that comes to mind?
um, it's interesting because I see it differently than other people. I kind of think, so what? No big deal.
Okay. Okay. So I went ahead and found all these words for my audience, and all of these come from dictionary.com. Rest, cease work or movement in order to relax, refresh oneself, or recover strength. Therapy is the treatment intended to relieve or heal a disorder. Habit, a settled or regular tendency or practice, especially the one that is hard to give up. And then, excuse me, insomnia says prolonged and usually abnormal inability to obtain adequate sleep, especially due to difficulty falling asleep or staying asleep. Okay, so um, everything pretty much lined up. I'm interested to see why you feel the way you feel about insomnia. Now I know, of course, you specialize in that, but
Yeah, well, so what I teach people is that insomnia is really, really connected to our fear of not being able to sleep. So that's really what drives insomnia is when we lie down and we think, uh-oh, what if I can't get enough sleep? And then we can spiral from there. Well, if I can't sleep, then I'm not going to be able to work the next day, or I'm not going to be good at what I need to do. I'm not going to enjoy my weekend. Whatever we're afraid of, it gets really magnified at night and we start to feel really anxious about it. And so that's what I try to teach people is if you don't sleep, it's not a big deal, which is actually true. But in the moment, we don't feel like that. And so I think, a lot of people, when they think about insomnia, it's like a real fear reaction. And for some people, night after night of experiencing it, they like feel the fear even thinking about it. So my immediate reaction is, so what? It's not a big deal because that's what I'm, trying to teach people. And I really believe it now at this point.
Okay. And it's funny because we kind of getting into it all so early. But basically, I think it's kind of like when you have the mentality like you have of so what, right? It kind of helps people who, and it definitely helped me when I used to, not for sleep, but for like with therapy and when I used to go and kind of develop the mindset of even if the worst happens, so what? And
Mm-hmm.
so if you don't get to sleep, I mean, in reality, you're gonna fall asleep eventually.
Mm-hmm.
And I've learned even recently to stop trying to fight that whole force myself to go to sleep. I personally believe that it's meant for me to get up and do something, whether that's pray or whether that's get something in line, in the natural. It's something I need to do. And it's like if you wake up, I know it happened to me. Actually, this past week, I woke up every day at 1 o'clock in the morning and then would just be up to like 4.
Yeah, it happens.
So yeah, and so I think that it's just kind of that mindset of like, okay, you need to. It's the reason this is happening, and of course, maybe get into the root of it. But does it need to necessarily stop, or do you maybe need to push your sleep back? It's so many ways you can go with that. So we're definitely gonna get into it as we go along. So, all right, first segment of the day, not the first, but the one we really get into the meat of it or start to. What does this have to do with mental health? All right. So now, when it comes to rest, I'm gonna ask two questions because there is a difference between
Mhm.
rest and sleep. So when it is important to how important is it for people to get the proper rest? We'll start with that first. What do you think about that?
Um, you know, rest, I think is different than sleep.
It is.
So, I like to think about this as like kind of being able to turn your brain off, not worrying about things, not focusing on your to-do list, just kind of being, calm and at peace. That's what I think of as rest. Now, sleep is different, right? Sleep is when you're actually fully asleep.
Right.
So how important is it for people to get rest? Very important. Um, how important is it for people to get enough sleep? I mean, I kind of think about that differently because I think we put pressure on ourselves to get enough sleep and we try so hard to do it. And as you probably know, trying really hard doesn't help. It's just going to make it worse. So if we let go of the idea of what we need it to look like, then it'll be easier. So I don't want to think about needing to get sleep. I think the rest part is really important, almost more important. So, you can't just let your computer or your phone run. You've got to shut them down every once in a while, let them kind of have some time to, recover. If it's running and running and running, it's
Right.
it's going to burn out.
Okay. Definitely. So when it comes to I think now it's funny because when it comes to mental health and how we act, think, and feel, and of course you're a therapist, I think that like we kind of getting into when people don't get the right amount of sleep, and then maybe it's for me too. Like I'll go to work, say for instance, those mornings where I was at work and maybe was running off 3 hours of sleep. I think in my brain, although physically I was affected, I think I was more mentally affected than physically because I'm thinking, oh, I only
Mhm.
had 3 hours of sleep. Oh, I only had 3 hours of sleep versus getting 6 or 7 hours on a
Mhm.
normally. So, and we ain't gonna get into it too much right now, but the statistic, which believed to be true, was that adults need 6 to 8 hours of sleep Would you say that that was false?
So most adults need somewhere between 6 and 9 hours. But and so 6 feels really like not a lot for some people, but some people do fine with 6 hours. There are people out there who are what's called short sleepers, like they really only need 5 hours, sometimes as little as 4. It's rare. Like this is not a, really a common thing, but it happens where that's just what their body needs. Is they do fine with 5, and they're not tired during the day, and they feel okay, and that's what their body does naturally. The biggest issue they have is that they're trying so hard to sleep 8 hours that they're
Yeah, right.
stressed about it. So the majority of people do well with between 6 and 9, but that's not everyone.
Exactly. Okay. So now, how did you get into CBT?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, and I think it's worth mentioning that CBT for insomnia is a little different than regular CBT, which you probably know about and have heard about. So CBT stands for cognitive behavioral therapy, and um, CBT for insomnia is kind of its own type of therapy.
Okay.
It's a very short-term structured therapy that's just focused on sleep. Um, and it's kind of its own separate training. So the way I got into it, so I like to share this because it's helpful. My whole family, except for one person, has always struggled with sleep problems. And so this is something that was like in my mind growing up. I grew up with people having sleep problems and experienced it myself. And so, as a therapist, I had to do, trainings, and I was kind of drawn toward CBT for insomnia training because I was curious. And then once I did the training, I really connected with the teachers of it, and the material. So it was really fascinating. And I started to practice it, and I got a supervisor and worked with the supervisor and started to really get into it. And what I saw was people can change their sleep really quickly, and without medications, without doing some of the drastic stuff people do to try to get
Mhm.
sleep. And when you see that like happen quickly as a therapist, you feel like, oh my God, this is unbelievable. Like I want to see this more and I want to do this because when you have something that's very kind of clear and you therapy isn't always like that where you can tell people you do these set of things and it will work for you. And that's kind of how
Mhm.
this therapy is. And it's very accessible, and for a lot of people it's really helping them. So, I got very passionate about it once I saw the change that could take place quickly.
Right. Okay. Definitely. And that's the thing. It was something that you saw, which they kind of teach you. I'm learning in a lot of things. You saw an error, you saw a flaw, you saw something that you wanted to make a change, somewhere you wanted to make a change. And
Yeah.
so, have any of your family members been in any of your clients, or have you shared the wealth with your family and noticed the difference in house first?
Um, I find that talking to family members about the way I see things is sometimes not that helpful.
Yeah.
um, so, I try to tread lightly with that. So I will, occasionally give a little input here and there. And I do think that it's really helped me. So that's important to share. It's really changed my sleep, and a lot of things. The way I see things generally has changed. Um, and I think that the people in my family, Yeah, I think they can see it. It's just, it's different. When it's someone you know that
No,
well, you don't wanna hear the advice from them necessarily.
yeah.
You know what I
Because
mean?
it's unfortunate because that's just how it is. Like people are gonna always see you as little so and so from, oh, that's so and so's son or that's so and so's daughter. What do they know? They just and that's unfortunate. But a lot of times, people can't always do miracles in their hometown in their family because people just can't receive it from them, like because they feel like they know you. And even if you, which I'm obviously you did go get a just a bunch of knowledge and learn and certifications and all these other things, and people will still be like, oh, okay,
Right,
well, what do
right.
you know?
People need to come to things, I think, on their own time, the way
Yeah,
that they need to come to it, and I think, yeah, you can't force someone to see things a certain way, and so I try to be supportive and helpful, but without pushing.
right. And that's always the best way to be. 'Cause-
Try.
so according to nami.com, it says rest is not accomplished by simply taking time off and then going back to your busy schedule. Rest occurs when you allow yourself to be fully inactive. A period of stillness and rest may be a necessary precursor to a more active mental health recovery. It
Mm,
says after a period of rest, you may find that you are more motivated to engage in activities like exercise, reading, crafting, praying, journaling, or spending time with loved ones. You will be more likely to benefit from those wellness promoting activities if you have taken time to rest first. So obviously that's a difference between sleep. And I'm glad we're doing it like this because people get to see that there is a difference.
mhm,
And you can burn out like she used the information with the computer and the phone.
mhm.
So message to myself, and I'm sure to somebody else, stop leaving your computer plugged up for days at a time. And turn it off. Again, me to me. But also you need that too.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting because I think we live in such a society where everything is like super burnout, super
Mhm.
go, 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 go until I sleep when I'm dead or I rest when I'm dead. And what is your take on that?
Um, you know, I don't think it's helpful. Um, Even if you're not, so there's a difference between being in bed and being asleep, right? And being restful. And so, one of the things I try to get people to do is have wind down time where they're kind
Mhm.
of offline in the evening, not necessarily off screens, but let's say you do want to watch TV, but you want to watch something like not the news, but something very kind of
Please, not that.
relaxing. Yeah, something that is, you know, easy, like a comedy, or even, the one of the things I like to suggest if people are into this is like a nature documentary or something where you can just like watch it, but you're not stressed by it or upset by it. And that wind down period without working, without checking your email is a really important, because a lot of us are like working, 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 or studying or whatever we're doing. And then at, 11 p.m., I'm going to turn it off and just expect my brain is going to just turn off. But we're not giving it the right support to do that. So, the way that I treat people in therapy is to spend not as much time in bed, um, but give yourself plenty of time for wind down. And this particular part isn't exactly a part of CBTI, but I just think that busy brain, constant going, can be a big contributor to insomnia in the first place.
Hmm. So another thing I'm guilty about. What is your take on people? Because you talk about the wind down time, and I've
Mhm.
had those periods before where I will kind of start getting together. It seems like it takes me a long time to do that though. But what is your take on? Well, I'm not gonna ask your take. Do you think it's healthy, or is it or not healthy, or is it just kind of like whatever for people who sleep with the TV on?
Um, I'm not opposed to watching TV prior to bed, just like what I was saying. I, you know, we want to. I think it's a crutch.
Mm,
It's kind of a crutch because it's like white noise. I think is I need this on so that I don't think about the things that I'm worried about. Or right, it's that's usually why people are doing that. Or maybe they're watching TV on the couch and then they fall asleep. Um, and then they get up and go to the bedroom or something like that. It depends what people's habits are, but um, it's a habit that I think would be most helpful to avoid. Um, and if it's and I think it's I think we're afraid of kind of being alone with our own thoughts and like what if I because this happens all the time is people be watching TV and then they'll go to their bed and then their brain is like, nope, now you're awake. And I think that's part of the issue for people why they want to sleep with the TV on. But we can work on it without having it to be a crutch, that way.
okay. So have you ever had patients that slept with the TV on and maybe it was a suggestion that you gave them to like stop doing it? And if you so let me ask that first. Have you ever had that situation with a client? And what was your first suggestion, or how did you help them to ease out of it? Or did they ease out of it, or they just kind of was like, or like what?
Um, I certainly have. I mean, plenty of people do that. Yes, it happens all the time. Um, I think it depends. I mean, if we have a TV in the bedroom, if that's what's going on, I think that's probably part of the problem. So what I suggest people do is use the bed only for sleep. So this is part of the structure of CBTI is use the bed only
Okay,
for sleep. So what that means is no reading, no watching TV, no looking at your phone, all those things in bed. So those things you can do. You just want to give it a separate space. I'm not opposed to any of those things, but it's the way that our brain starts to set up a condition, what's called a conditioned response. If we think about Pavlov and the dogs, that's the best example of a conditioned response, and this happens all the time in our lives. So we want our conditioned response to be that the bed is for sleep and it's kind of pure sleep. This is where I
right.
sleep. And so we do that by cutting out other activities in bed. Um, we also, one of the other ways we do this is by, encouraging sleepiness. So I don't know if you've ever had this happen, but if you're really, really sleepy, like if you've slept terribly for a while, and you get in bed, you probably don't need the TV on because you're just going to
No,
fall asleep.
right.
So, the encouraging sleepiness helps with this as well, which the way we do this is to restrict a sleep schedule to some degree, um, in order to encourage the sleepiness.
Okay. So just an example. Say somebody wants to sleep 7 hours,
Okay.
and you'll say, okay, for the next. This is a random example. The next 3 weeks, you need to go to sleep for like 3 hours, and then something like maybe not 2 weeks, but something like that.
So the way we do this, it's kind of a formula. Um, People might think they want to sleep 7 hours, but we need to see what their body needs and what their body would like to do. So the way that I work with this is I have someone keep a sleep diary for a few weeks before we even do anything because I want to see what their natural habits look like. So let's say they're sleeping 3 hours a night. I don't think that's usually what's happening. But it may happen a night or two. It's usually not happening for the whole time. Um, let's say their average is 6 hours. So that's the starting point is to restrict it to a 6 hour schedule. So we wouldn't restrict it more, any more than what the average is. Or so it might look like 3 hours one night and 6 hours another night, but we're really just trying to gauge like what's the average, because they might be doing like a short night and then like kind of what I call binging on sleep, like trying to catch up. But the restriction, it sounds like a little scary to people is to like restrict, but we're talking about restricting it to something that like their average based on, the course of several weeks.
Right. Okay. Okay. And all right, let me go into this next quote because I don't want to overload with questions right now. So let me go into this. So this is from firehab.com. It says the average adult who is 18 to 60 years old, it says requires at least 7 hours of sleep per night. We obviously have learned what 30 minutes in, that's not necessarily the case. It says the actual amount you need may vary. So I like that. And it says that so you have to determine what works best for your needs. And I didn't plan for her to say all that, y'all. I really didn't. So this just kind of aligned. It then says as you age, your sleep needs and patterns will change, but it's still important that you get quality sleep. Um, this is gonna hurt my feelings. It says sleeping for short spurts isn't going to provide you with quality sleep that's beneficial. That kind of correlates with what you said about the whole binging sleep, because I'm kind of a napper, and I was told a few months ago now that even though like they was like you need to get your sleep at nighttime, and I'm like, well, I take naps, and they was like, well, your circadian rhythm is still thrown off. So can you? Oh, you're not. Okay, so that means yeah. Okay. And that basically that there are two types of sleep, REM and non.
Yes.
So okay. So basically it says it has 4 stages: light dozing but not refreshing, middle intensity sleep that's refreshing, 3 and 4 slow wave sleeping that's very refreshing. Okay, so now with that, so let me go based on my sleep. My sleep isn't horrible. It's I say it's like decent, right?
Mm-hmm.
Personally, for me, I always, and I hear this from a lot of people, I always wake up in the middle of the night. Never fails. I know my
Mm-hmm.
mom says she sleeps the whole night. I was like, I wish I could. But I always sleep. It's like it's a routine. I wake up at like 1 or 2 o'clock. Actually, try to get up at 5:15, but something happens where it seems I wake up at not 5:15. I lied, 5:30, and then
Okay.
something will happen where I like always wake up at 4:45, and I be mad because I be like, really. And I try to go back to sleep. Sometimes it works, and I wake back up at the time. Sometimes I oversleep. Sometimes
Okay.
I just don't sleep at all. So I've tried to do it on my own where I'm saying, well, I'll say like, okay, I'm gonna set my alarm for early in the middle of the night and
Okay.
then wake up, go because a lot of times I have to go to the restroom. And so I do that and then go back to sleep. Now, I heard somebody else say they tried this too. As the expert, is that healthy?
To wake up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, you mean?
No, to actually basically kind of force it, like to set an alarm so that I can wake up at a time earlier than because what happens is, like I said, I'll supposed to get up at one time, and I'll get up 30 to 40 minutes earlier than that. And human nature, you like, oh, I still got time. Let me.
Yeah. So I think what would help for you is to cut out the napping because it would encourage sleepiness. So if the idea behind all of this is the more sleepy you are, the easier it is to fall asleep, but the easier it is to stay asleep as well. So going to bed, you want to be really sleepy. And if you've napped during the day, it's going to take away from that nighttime sleepiness. So what we do to help encourage sleepiness is what I mentioned before, is restrict the schedule based on the average, right? So giving you a certain window of time, but we want that window of time to be consistent. So if you're going to wake up at 5:30 and that's your goal, I mean, first of all, what I would want to look at is, well, is that what your body wants? Because you might be more of a night owl, and getting up at 5:30 is just really not going to work for you. It may be. I don't know what I would need to, kind of learn more. But
Right.
setting an alarm for the same time every day So if you're going to get up at 5:30, that's your goal. Let's just say you do that for, for a while, for several weeks at least, sometimes even months, and you build up sleepiness. So if you're getting up at 5:30 3 or 4 days a week, and then, the other days you're like, no, I can sleep in. I'm going to sleep till 8:30. That's not going to help you. That's going to kind of cause what we call social jet lag, which is like it's kind of like a jet lag feeling. It's like you're in a different time zone.
Right. Okay. Okay.
So consistency, waking at the same time, no matter what, trying to go to bed at approximately the same time. But here's the key, or later. So if you're not sleepy, don't go to sleep. Just you're up and you get up at the same time. Don't push it. You're not trying to adjust your schedule. You're keeping it. You just get less sleep that night. And that's good news because you're going to be sleepier, right? That's what we want. Does that make sense?
No, it makes a lot of sense. That's what I'm like, okay. Because like you said, if you're doing something consistently, like I don't know what I'm trying to do. I'm gonna do that, but I'm gonna do it. So comparing this to like working out, right? When a person first starts working out, changing their diet, you can start cheating later down the line. But in the beginning, you have to be pretty strict, pretty strict and pretty consistent with not only the workouts, but also with the diet. That way, it won't be as effective. Versus you've done it for a few weeks, built the routine, built the habits. You want to have a cheat day, go have it. You can do that now. But
Mm-hmm.
it builds, it comes to that. You know what I mean? Especially for people, I don't have those, but the people that do have abs and those kind of things, I've seen them, they eat pretty bad, but on that day,
Mm-hmm.
or they have their cheat meal or whatever. So it's kind of like what you're saying. It's kind of like a cheat day with sleep, but you have to work for that. It can't just come the first week when you start to decide, oh, I'm gonna wake up at this time. And in my mind, I used to think like because I'm an educator, so when the school year would come back around, I would go the 2 weeks prior to school starting. I'm gonna start getting back in a routine.
Yep.
Okay, that sounds good, but then if you do the same thing on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday of getting up whenever, it's kind of like, is it effective? Maybe a little, but not really. So,
Right. And I think you said you work with teens, right? And so teens most of the time, not always, but most of the time have kind of a natural shift in their sleep schedule where they're going to
mhm,
start to stay up later and sleep later. It's kind of a natural part of adolescence where we have a little bit of what's called a delay in our sleep phase where we push a little later and want to sleep a little later. So what this
right,
looks like for most teens, right, because school start times are so early, they're struggling, they're tired because they can't fall asleep early because they're not wired that way right at that point in time. So then they try to catch up by trying to sleep in on the weekends, and most of them will really sleep in. They're 7 o'clock during the week, let's say, and then noon on the weekends. That's a big difference. And that, like, just like what I was saying, like we're asking our brain, like when I was talking about how we're working, 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 and then we're asking our brain to shut off and go to sleep, that it's a big, shift. Same with sleeping late. Like we're not encouraging sleepiness. So then you get to Sunday night and you're like, well, why aren't I tired? Well, because you slept till noon twice. You're binging on sleep those days. It's not helping you. So the cheat day, it's more that you want to just be really consistent about it so that you can build up this sleepiness.
right.
It's not forever, but it's going to help you. And just being more consistent will help you get tired and sleepy earlier.
Definitely, definitely. And I'm learning that today. Okay. So let's move into the other segment, the weekly sabbatical, and just kind of reflect about a few things. So first of all, we know with Sabbath, I've defined that, which I haven't done yet. Well, I did the first episode. But anyway, according to dictionary.com, is a day of religious observance and abstinence from work kept by Jewish people from Friday evening to Saturday evening, and by most Christians on Sunday. So I believe that it is a commandment for a reason. It's a need for a reason. Do you think that social media, the media, the news, as you brought up earlier, has made it easy for people to not rest?
Yeah, definitely. There's always something on, there's always something to do, um, particularly with the news and even with social media too. It's sometimes it's really upsetting information that when we're watching the news and there's some thing that's happened that's distressing, our brain reacts to that. And so getting that input can make us feel stressed, which can make it much harder to get to sleep. So yeah, I do. I think that's definitely impacting people.
If you could pinpoint one thing, and it kind of correlates with what you were saying, because I remember back in the day, like grandparents' time, I know they were telling me that the TV shut off at a certain time,
Mm-hmm.
and my whole life something is on 24 hours. And
Mm-hmm.
then as I got older with social media, the social media never dies, you know. But why do you think avoiding rest has become a trend for like young millennials?
I think it's the busy brain, like it's our brain is busy, it becomes a habit. So
Hmm.
like um it's interesting. I don't think we think of things that way. Like anxiety is a habit, worrying, that kind of stuff, feeling kind of addicted to stress. It just becomes a habit. So the more options we have to that we're drawn to them, so and our brain gets used to doing and doing and doing. And so then if we don't spend, time winding down, being quiet, it's very hard to teach the brain that that's okay, that that's safe. It's they're so used to having busy brain constantly.
Okay. Okay. Now, when it comes to dreaming and sleep and rest and all of that, what is how do I want to ask this? Because me personally, I'm a dreamer. Like I dream a lot.
Okay.
Do you think that maybe sometimes, and not always necessarily nightmares, but do you believe that sometimes the dreams that people have affect the way they sleep?
um I mean, if you're having a stressful dream, um yes, you can feel physical stress when you're sleeping, sure. I think it's more likely the way that someone's feeling during the day
Okay.
affects the way they sleep and dream.
Okay. Okay. So now I have some ways to improve your sleep from the same source, and then Miss Annie is going to let me know like if that's a good one, or if she agrees, or if
Okay.
she kind of like, I don't know about that one. All right. So it says one of the best things you can do to improve your sleep is to set up a sleep pattern. It says try to go to bed and wake up at the same time. If you can't stay asleep or fall asleep, get up and do something relaxing before trying to sleep again. We literally discussed that pretty much the whole time. So I think that's a good one.
Yeah.
Same thing again. Trying to avoid stimulating activity before bed may also help. While you need to do physical activity, you should avoid doing exercise at least 3 hours before bedtime. Okay.
I yes, physical activity can rev up your heart rate, and that I think it's better to do it earlier. But like, let's say doing yoga. So I don't think everything is falls into that category, because let's say you want to do yoga or even something like Tai Chi, which is really relaxing. 3 hours before bed is going to be more helpful than it is going to be harmful.
Right. Or like even just good stretches before you go to
Right.
sleep. I try to explain to people the needs for it. I had to learn the hard way. So I try to warn my friends like, hey, you go to the gym, please stretch before and after.
Yeah.
Stretch even before you go to sleep. Like you'll notice a difference because, like I said, I had to learn the hard way. So before I get into the next ones, how long have you been in this field?
Um, I've been a therapist for about 15 years, doing this particular work with sleep. I I think it's been about 6 or 7 years.
Okay. Okay. So I'm guessing you love what you do, and
I
is
do.
all of your clients from home, or are they is like hybrid?
It's hybrid. I'm more online these days than in person, but I'm in my office now, so I'm here. It's yeah, hybrid.
Okay. Okay. So the third one says trying to leave enough time between your final meal and bedtime for food to digest properly if possible. Avoid foods that can cause indigestion because the painful burning pressure can make it hard to sleep. When I was younger, I used to be kind of a glutton, and I used to eat like right before bed. Like I'm talking like food on the side of the bed, roll over and go to sleep. And it didn't happen right away, but after a while, I would notice my stomach would start to like ache
Mhm.
really bad. And obviously, I stopped doing that now. But it has been some nights where it's just kind of happened. But not on the side of the bed. I'm not there no more. I'm not doing that. But I definitely noticed the difference in doing it and not doing it. And even if I don't eat right before bed, like maybe even an hour before, a little more than an hour before,
Mhm.
because I like to wake up hungry. Because sometimes if I don't wake up hungry, like it'll just be like a bottomless pit during the day versus wake up hungry, eat, and then it just kind of be like balance. Like you said, with the binge sleeping, the binge eating kind of thing, trying to play catch up, and then
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
eat everything in sight.
Mhm.
So, have you had any of had do you think that eating habits, I mean, I'm sure you know the answer to that, but eating habits affect sleep like a lot or more than we realize? Let me ask that. Do we think does eating our eating habits and patterns affect our sleep more than we realize?
You know, I think it's so the eating part is not, my particular. I don't know as much about that. But I do think if you eat right before you go to sleep, the way I think about it is that you're kind of giving your body two jobs to do at the same time,
Mm,
digest and sleep. And it does make it harder to have a deeper sleep, right? Because again, it's like you're asking your body to multitask, which isn't helpful. Um, Now, there are some people who eat right before they go to bed and they're fine. So, sometimes like a light snack can help, but I actually work with a lot of people who wake up overnight and eat.
mhm.
So they're waking up they're waking up at 1, 2 in the morning, whatever time it is, and then they need something to eat and they feel like they need it to eat to go back to sleep. So that's something I see actually pretty regularly. People tend to think it's not happening to other people, but it's happening often. But again, it's a habit too. So it's something we can work on. And again, if you're really, really sleepy, you're going to probably be able to push through. And once you break the habit, it's easier to maintain it.
Okay, so now I just thought about it, and you talking about people waking up in the middle of the night to eat. So, sleepwalkers.
Hmm.
You have any clients like that? I've never seen a person that actually does that, and I say I want to, but I don't know if I really do because I hear sometimes they get violent, depending. I have heard a story about that just through like a friend's friend, but sleepwalkers. Have you ever dealt with that like from personal experience?
No, I haven't dealt with it from personal experience. I have seen clients who have behaviors like that, like sleepwalking or doing other kind of strange things in their sleep. Um, and there are things that can help with that. One of the main things that is recommended in that case is like scheduling an awakening. Like so, people usually sleepwalk around the same time because it's part of the when they're in a certain part of their sleep cycle. Um, so yeah, I have seen it. It's not like I think there are people out there who are better at treating who are more focused on treating like parasomnias like that. But I have seen it. Yeah.
Okay. All right, so let's move into the last one. It says you also need to work on improving your mental health. This includes going to your therapy appointments, taking any medication, going through the activities that your mental health team assigned you. It might also help you to have a support team that can count on you to help you through times. I agree with that wholeheartedly when it's as far as improving your sleep, because obviously what you don't deal with awake can visit you at nighttime, whether,
Mhm.
like you said, the thoughts racing, whether it could be a dream about the situation, a nightmare about the situation, whether it could just keep you up. You know what I mean? You won't even go to sleep at all. And then you can't fully rest because your mind is racing. So although rest and sleep are different, if you don't take care of your brain, your mental health, and all of that, both will be affected in a negative way. And yeah, it won't be too good.
Mhm. Mhm.
All right, so let's move into the last segment, which is game time.
Okay.
And this game is called Rest or Die. So I'm gonna, you know one's gonna die, but I'm gonna name a few scenarios, and I want you to tell me whether this person is getting the proper rest, sleep
Okay.
that they need to get, whatever. And if not, like they may need to go back to the drawing board. So are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Running off of 2 hours of sleep on a regular and uses coffee and Red Bull to get themselves together.
No, that's not going to work.
Consistently getting 5 hours of sleep, but drags in the morning.
Um, so I suspect not. Um, as I mentioned, some people do fine with that, but they probably wouldn't feel so draggy in the morning like that.
Okay. Getting 8 hours of sleep, awake, moving around just fine, but moves slow.
Um, I think that should be okay. I think that's probably an unrelated issue to sleep.
Yeah, in my mind. So here's the thing: I'm a morning person, and in my mind, I think I'm moving faster than what I am. But
Hmm.
I'm awake. I'm fully awake. It's just kind of like in my mind, I think I'm doing like this, but in
Yeah.
reality, it's like
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah, that's
really,
interesting.
it's just really slow. But I'm there. Okay. Going to sleep every night at 10 o'clock, waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning for a slice snack,
Hmm.
going back to sleep around 4 o'clock, and then waking up at 6.
So we just talked about that, right?
Yep. We did.
Really common. I I think that's a disruption. So I think that's a problem that is solvable if they work on it, because it's kind of like having these two distinct periods of sleep, which is generally not helpful for most people.
Okay. Okay. All right. Last one. Never goes to sleep at the proper time, wakes up at different times in the morning, but they feel fine.
Um, it's better to be consistent, right? But if this does not feel like a problem for them, then, first of all, I'm not going to see them in therapy, right? So they're probably going to keep going as is and if they start feeling bad, that's when it's more of an issue.
All right. And then the last one, which I have, but we know the answer to that, goes to sleep at different times of the night, but is consistent with their wind down times and consistent with just having the same consistent routine before going to bed.
I would say that's helpful. And if they're going to bed at different times, it's the wake time is more important. So as long as
Right.
they're waking up at the same time, that's helpful. But if they're it's more helpful for it to be consistent, as we talked about. So
Right.
um, I would want them to have like a time that they go to bed or later. And if it's later than that, I actually think it's okay because they're building up their sleepiness, as we talked about.
Okay. Good stuff. Good
Mm.
stuff. Okay. Final segment. It's not really a segment. It's just a question and challenge. It's just for the audience. And it's just to ask, how do you plan to get proper rest moving forward? And I'm glad we learned the difference between rest and sleep. Both are needed, but both are needed different ways. All right. So I want to thank you for coming through today. Well, zooming in. Is there anything that you want to say before you go?
I don't think so. Just thank you for having me, and I hope people can take some things from this.
Definitely. I did for sure. If nobody else did, I did. I'm going to be consistent with getting up, even on weekends, getting up at the same time. I'm gonna try for like the next 2 months or so. I might start slow, say with the next month, and then go and then add to it.
Let me know
And
how it goes.
yeah, I will. I definitely will.
Okay.
All right, y'all. So thank y'all for tuning in. Tune in next week. PSA signing out. Always remember, keep your head up like your neck hurts. Remember who you are and make your mind up. Don't let it make you.